Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is James Cousins, and I'm joined by Jessi Sweeny. I have the privilege of being joined by Jessi Sweeny, and I'm very excited today to be co-hosting as Jessi presents on best practices for delivering actionable BI business intelligence to stakeholders. Just as a couple of housekeeping notes, because we always like to mention them. Actually, just before we get to that, I will mention that I will get to that. We are going to cover a little bit about our personal backgrounds and our institution/organizational background. And then we'll be off to the races with the actual presentation. It comes in two phases, this presentation. The first is the process of growing into a business intelligence role. So from the start and starting to generate some of your preliminary business intelligence products. I guess with the camera flipped, it's more on this side, right? So your preliminary business intelligence projects, and then growing into making them more and more responsive to business needs, to making them more efficient, and in a lot of cases more fun and valuable to be generating. And then the second part is a lot about best practices pretty much for any stage that you find yourself. We'll also take questions from the audience, and we will try to perhaps do that throughout, but we'll definitely leave space at the end, as is tradition with these sorts of web presentations. This is being recorded. Sorry, I thought I would just double check. This is being recorded, meaning that that awkward bit of self-doubt there was captured in full 1080p, and we will be happy to share a recording of this presentation with you for either your own review after the fact, or for sharing with colleagues, or for anyone who might benefit from the advice. I did also want to emphasize that we really embrace this opportunity to not just to offer the expertise and to host the insights that Jessi has accumulated through her experience, but we also embrace the opportunity to make them responsive to what you're interested in seeing. So there's a questions panel in the GoToWebinar toolbar. You'll find it off on the right side of your screen. Hopefully I got the flipped camera right that time. And if you want to, you can even go ahead and send in a test question if you want to. You can just say hi, say how are we doing, all that kind of stuff. But it's in there, and we'd be happy to hear from you. So the presenters, and really it's mostly Jessi, but I will first give you a fleeting impression of myself if you haven't already gathered one. I used to work in institutional research at an institution of higher education, and since then I have started to work for Rapid Insight, where I act sort of as the figurative 12th man for a lot of different businesses and organizations. So working with fundraising and healthcare and manufacturing and higher education. And it's a lot of fun. And that's what all of us analysts at Rapid Insight really like about our job. I will share a little bit about Rapid Insight, but I want to be clear that I'm doing this mostly to give appropriate context for the rest of the presentation. A lot of the work that Jessi's done and a lot of the work that Jessi is going to be sharing happens to have been done with Rapid Insight products in conjunction with the teamwork and the expertise that she has within the organization. But it suffices for you to know that the company, Rapid Insight, we've been around for a while, and our biggest point of emphasis in everything that we do is helping people to use data for themselves. So whether that's making it code free so that a wider variety of people can contribute, or making it faster and streamlined so that if you're a power user, you can do it faster and more streamlined. That's our goal. And you'll be hearing a lot about our products. So to give you an image to have in mind, the application Construct uses what we call jobs as workflows to process data and to output it to any destination that you need. And you can connect to any resource. Most importantly, you should know this because this is a lot of how Jessi's been delivering and generating and delivering business intelligence. Predict is a similar solution in its visual focus and its ease of use, primarily for predictive modeling and statistical exploration. And then finally, another big aspect of what Jessi does and what many of the users at her school do, a Bridge, which is a cloud-based data and dashboard sharing resource. So mostly I wanted to show you these again so that when she mentions them throughout her presentation, you feel comfortable. What she's describing are data workflows that reach out to data, prepare them, and then on the far end, a platform that shares it with end users so that they can take action and they can help to drive the institution, the organization where it needs to go. That is all that I will say about myself, and I am now happy for both my sake and for the audience's sake to say that I am handing it over to you, Jessi.
Thank you. I'm Jessi. I work at LMU at the DeBusk College of Osteopathic Medicine. And a little bit about what I do, I am an assessment data specialist, and mostly I work with blending, storing, managing large data sets, getting everything that the other people in my department need at their fingertips to do analysis is my main job. And I went to ETSU, and I also went to LMU. After I started working here, I finished my BBA in accounting because I do love numbers, but what I found is I don't so much love accounting, but I like working with numbers. I really like the management and organizational side of dealing with data. And so when I came to work here at DCOM, I started in the curriculum office, and what our main goal here at DCOM is like to deliver quality medical care to the rural area. So when I came here and I started in the curriculum office, I sort of built my job. The school had only been open for a few years, and so everything was new to me. I really didn't know anything about it. I came to it from a brief background in customer service and like store management. And so I came here on a whim, looking for something new, started there, and it kind of grew into the position that I'm in now. I've been with DCOM about 12 years, and I've been doing this position for the last 5. And the reason why this position that I'm currently doing is so important is because for a medical school, our program is structured a little bit differently than you would think of when you think of going to college. It's not like undergraduate in that our classes are scheduled out for the student. So instead of like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class or a Tuesday, Thursday class, they will take class from basically 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And we have, at one point in time, I was responsible for creating our entire schedule for the semester. It's 20 weeks. And our students are here on campus for the first 2 years. And they all go through the same thing. So we are keeping the same type of data on them. It's pretty uniform. We're keeping all of their exam grades and all of their final course grades. And our main goal in the first 2 years is to get them through to their first licensing exam. That will then allow them to go on to rotation. So we want them to be prepared when they go to rotations, but the biggest hurdle is getting past their first licensing exam. And once they get past that and they go out into rotations for 2 years, the data becomes very scrambled. Everyone has their own individual schedule. They all have to do the same rotation, but they're doing it at one of 1,000 different sites. I mean, we have so many different sites and so many different preceptors that work with them. So everyone kind of has their own individual schedule, and they're taking exams in their rotations that allow them to pass or fail the rotation. They're allowed multiple attempts to do that, and it's through the licensing organization that does all of our, like the medical licensing. They log all of the scores on their website just as a rolling log for their testing cycle. So if someone happens to take 3 of their COMATs, which is their end of rotation exam, 3 times, they have 9 scores in the log, and there's no way to really track when they took it or what they had before we had the Rapid Insight product. So we had someone who was basically having to go in and track it manually by hand for all of our students, and we have roughly 500 students per class, so we have about 2,000 active students at one time. So in doing that, their next biggest hurdle, they have another licensing exam, and it's just structured like the first one where it's a regular test and they can take it multiple times, and it's the same thing. It's just a rolling log, of course. So we had all of this information. It was existing in multiple different departments. We had lots of people trying to keep track of it, and we didn't really have any central source for reconciling the information and validating it, confirming that it's all correct. And that's sort of how my job grew into what it was. And I'm a little bit known here for just taking a job and running with it. So whenever I came into it, it was literally with the focus of, we've bought this Rapid Insight product. We want you to learn how to use it so that you can help us manage our data. And that's basically what I've done. I took a position and I've grown into literally into business intelligence and grown into using Rapid Insight every single day. And so I'm assuming that's why I'm here talking to you today. So the first thing I want to talk about, when you're starting out and you're trying to figure out where do I start, what do I do? If someone comes to you with a request and you say, how do I take this from beginning to fruition? I have some steps that I just sort of go through in my mind now before I really used to outline it. I'm a list person, and it's easier for me if I can see the processes. So my first tip would be, anytime you get a request, outline it or organize it. It might be a simple request, so it might be a 2-step process, or it might require data from 10 different departments and 10 different worksheets, and you're trying to figure out how do you make it all work together. So the first thing I like to do is just sort of lay it out, what is the request, and how kind of get a game plan on how can I get to the end. My personal process on that is to work backwards. I have always done that. So I will say, okay, here's their envisioned end product, and here's what needs to go into it, and what can I do in order to get to the end? Who do I have to talk to? Where do I get the information from? How, do I know if it's going to be accurate? Am I going to need extra time spent on trying to check it or trace down other information to go with it? Once I've done that, I kind of start working on it and building the job, and I just create a foundational output. So it's just a preliminary report. I'll say, okay, you've given me this request. This is what you envisioned it to look like. This is why it does or doesn't look like that. Sometimes they think that it's going to be an incredibly fancy looking report when really all they need is just a set of data. So I'll give it to them, explain to them what has happened. This is what we have gotten. And what I want to show you is, so this is a job that I did last year. We look at students who are at risk in each of our classes, but specifically for our pharmacology course, we know that their performance in a few of the other courses can kind of predict how they will perform in pharmacology. And I was asked to put this together last year, kind of on the fly, and they wanted it back same day. And I knew I had all of the information. It existed in a lot of places. I also knew that I had other jobs I had done that gave me some of the information I needed. So what I did was outlined it. What do you need? What are all the variables, and where are they going to come from? What's the easiest way for me to get them? When I create the foundational one, I do whatever is easiest. I don't go into deep detail on how do I make this exactly perfect. How do I think this should look whenever I put it together, like on my job specifically inside Construct? Is it silly if I'm going to use, 25 nodes when I could use less? I don't know. But all I know is they asked me for something, they want it the same day. What is the easiest way I can get there? So in this instance, I pulled information from another job. All of this right here came from another job. This I knew I could put together and manipulate it some to get what I wanted, and same thing here. And I pulled it all together and it got them the same day output. And that's really what they were looking for. Once I got that, I think the next biggest step is reaching out. So you have your preliminary report. Reach out to the person who requested it from you. My requests don't always come from the end user. We have a director and an associate director of assessment, so a lot of times they will have a request for me that's meant for somebody else. So depending on who the person is, I will always reach out to the requester to say, here's sort of the preliminary report. Is there anything that you see that is missing or that we need to add? And depending on my relationship with who I know that the end user is, I may also reach out to them. Where I've been here for so long, I've worked with everybody that's here. And so there's a lot of people that I can just reach out to them and say, our director is asking me for this data to put together for you. Is there anything else that you want to see? Is there anything that we didn't think of? I can't promise that it's going to go in, but it gives us a talking point and something to consider for the future. And after I've reached out, if they do have anything that they think that they want to add in, I sort of prioritize that information. Number one, can I do it? A good example of this is we have some advisor reports that are laden with just exam grades. And they were wanting to know, can you put a list of all the instances when a student has gone to an academic counselor? Yes, I can do that, but it's not really appropriate for this report. So even though it was a want for them, it wasn't a need, but it was a want for them, and I could do it, it's not appropriate for that particular report. So I sort of just lay it out. Is it doable? Do we have access to that data? Is it appropriate to share with those end users? Is it appropriate for that particular report? And what is the most important thing? If I can only take one of their requests and make it happen, what is the most important thing? So I have to excuse me, I've been sick. I have coughing a lot. So after I've talked to him and made any necessary edits, I'll usually field test it. So it depends on how the report's going out. If it's just going out like it's a data set, I might share it. A lot of times I would go to our director or associate director. I'll just share that with them. But if it's something that's going out onto Bridge as a dashboard, I will kind of field test it. I like to take a few faculty members who have the most time to be able to sit and like go through the information, and then the ones that are the busiest and have the least amount of time to sit and try to figure out how to click around and what the information means. And I'll run it by them and say, can you look at this information? Can you tell me if it's user friendly the way that it's set up? Can you tell me if you see anything that's missing? And share with me what your problems are. That way I can try and make it easier for everybody. Like I don't want it to be a two-click stop. So basically they're signing in, they're clicking on their dashboard, and then at the most they click to drill down, and then that's it. So I try to make it as easy as possible for them. If any edits need to be made, I do that, and then if they decide that the preliminary report is what they need, we just use that as the final product, and then we go ahead and start communicating that with the department. So one of the things that I have to think about here, and I'm sure everybody else will have to think about, is that we have different levels of end users. For us, all users are not created equal. So the reason I say that is we have people in administration who are looking at this information, who are allowed access to more confidential information, versus anyone who's assigned as an advisor. They are allowed access to like final course grades and some of the practice exam testing scores, but they aren't allowed to see the actual scores from our medical licensing exams. I can, however, tell them a final pass or fail status, and so that's something that I keep like as a rolling log. I've built some jobs that help me keep track of that so that they can at least know where their advisors stand. And it's important to know those things because you don't want to accidentally give access to confidential data that isn't supposed to go to someone. So I like to look at who is going to need what. If I'm making one report and there's multiple levels of users that are going to need it, that is specifically where I will reach out. So in the instance of our advisors dealing with, they have a dashboard for semester reports, they have a dashboard for final course grades, they have a dashboard that gives them an indication of any issues that are happening with the student. And I do reach out to them and ask their input. I let it influence what I'm doing, but I make it very clear they can't decide what goes into a report. So it still comes back to me, and it's still my responsibility to make sure that we are sharing the appropriate information with the appropriate people. And I will show you. So this is what one of my advisor report jobs looks like. It puts all of their semester information in from Blackboard. That's the management system we use. It'll pull all of their grades in, and it'll allow them to see only their advisees the way that we have this particular job written out. What I know is I have 3 outputs here. We have a system called colleges, which is the equivalent of houses at Hogwarts. So the students get broken into 8 colleges at our Harrogate location and then 6 colleges at our Knoxville location. In Harrogate, we have what we call a lead advisor. Those advisors are responsible for their entire college. Each college has roughly, on average, 30 students. So the lead advisor will be responsible for all 30 students. They're responsible for working with their co-advisors to make sure that they're reaching out to their individually assigned advisees. So they need access to the exact same information, but they need access to a larger number of students. So we have it written out in a way that that information goes particularly only to the lead advisors. And if you are just a regular co-advisor, you will get a dashboard that only has your particular students in it. And then I also have one that's for administration that is every student in the class. So they can see it by location for every single student. And this is what the dashboard itself, what it looks like. This is one of our lead advisors. I do a little element here where he can see broken down by the advisors in his college. And then, he can click any of these totals so that he can see either his whole college at one time, or he can see his own individual assigned, or any of the ones assigned there. And then down below, I just do a little summary. There's more information available that if you drill down, it has individual exam grades. But this is what we put because if they're not going to click anything else, this is what we want them to see. If they're at risk, who they are, their advisor, and what their averages are. And this is a co-advisor, so she only has access to these 7 students, so this is what hers looks like. In doing that, that is actually one of the main reasons we first looked into Rapid Insight, is because we were trying to figure out how do we get information out to the faculty that we haven't been able to get out before. We need some type of platform to get it out to them. We need to make sure that they're getting the appropriate information. So when we first bought the Rapid Insight products and I came in, everything was unfamiliar to me. And I got quite a bit of training, luckily. Fortunately, from Rapid Insight, I am a question person. I probably asked a million questions the first 6 months that I was using the product. But they were great. They did help me set up that advisor job, and it's one of the things I love about it is that it's so easy. Every semester I can copy and paste the job over, replace the input to the correct class, and I just go a quick little look through all the notes to make sure everything's still working the way I want it to, and then it's just there. So I'm not having to rewrite these jobs every single year or every semester because it's already been written, and now all I have to do is copy and paste it and do very little maintenance on it. One of the big things about this to make it work for the different levels of users is the call for each node. I'm going to go back to, so this job I was showing you, this for administration puts one output, but for these lead advisors, there are 8 lead advisors. And the way that works is they have the call for each node. It breaks it down into who I have coded as a lead advisor and a regular advisor, so that whenever I run the job, it gives me a data set for every person. So whenever I run that job, this is my call for each mode. It's got my lead advisors and my regular advisors merged in there, so it knows how to differentiate between them. And when I run it, it gives me a singular data set for each person. So now I don't have to worry about whether or not Dr. Weston is getting the right advisees that I'm filtering down. I don't have to worry about doing the permissions exactly correct because he has his own, and I know that I can just work within the parameters of that. It seems like a lot because, to be honest, in one semester we do roughly 95 dashboards for the advisors. They're advising first and second year, and they have to have an individual one for both years. So we're doing roughly 95. And it seems like a lot, but we started out before we had Rapid Insight creating this information by hand in Excel and then taking it for each advisor, turning it into a password protected PDF and posting it on our share site. And it took a lot of time. Like a lot of time. It was what I would consider a major project. It took up a good chunk of my time. We have exams going every week, pretty much. So very rare that I skip a week on having to update these advisor reports. And now whenever I update them, right now, just to download the grade books and stick the information in takes less than 15 minutes to run them. When we create the dashboards at the beginning of the semester, or if we create them in the middle of the semester, like if we go in and maintain them, when we change course blocks, it takes less than 2 hours. Less than 2 hours to create them all, less than an hour usually just to update variables on which ones I want to show on the dashboard. And all of that is because of working with Rapid Insight. It's because of the Rapid Insight product. And it made everything much easier for me. So once I have a report done, so I have created a foundation for it. I have done a preliminary report. I've reached out to the requesters. Have made any edits. We've rolled out a final product. We're taking into account who is using what. Do they need data sets? Do they need dashboards? Thinking about the scalability because, in the future, how many people are you going to have to roll this out to, and how valuable is your time? If your time is incredibly valuable, which I would assume it is, my time is incredibly valuable, I have a lot of projects, then it's important to think about that because when you move forward after the report is done, it's like, what do you do with it now? Are you going to use it again? If it's a one-off, then, you can just sort of like leave it alone. But if it's something you're going to use even on a yearly basis, it's worth taking the time to go back and make it easier on yourself. So my next step in what do I do once my report's built is to go back and review and improve. And that could be done at any point in time. It could be done whenever I have extra time. I might do it the next time that I know I'm going to use the report. I might pull it up and build in some extra time in my schedule to go in and check everything and make sure that it's all still working appropriately, and taking the information that I have from some of the other jobs that I might have done and applying it now to this job. One of my problems, even still, with creating jobs is sometimes they're too tedious. As you saw on the other one, I use a lot of notes. And it's because in my mind, the way I know the notes work, I know how to make it, I know how to manipulate it to get what I want. And so that when I do my quick report, I know if I use these 5 notes that I can get what I want, but I also know that there's an easier way. So if it feels like what you're doing is too tedious, then it probably is too tedious. And this is something that I experience and go through still every day. Just yesterday, I was working on a report that I had built last week in anticipation of needing one piece of information. So I subbed it in for something else until we could get that. I got what I needed. I went back and realized I used like 6 nodes where I only needed 2. And I was making it so hard on myself. I was about to have to write code for an endless number of variables. I think there was probably like 75 variables in there. And I really just kind of stopped and was like, okay, is there a better way to do this? I've already built the job. I've already spent the time knowing how to get what I need, but I know there has to be an easier way. And so a good example is that the pharmacology at-risk list last year that I made. This year, when it came around, I had it on my schedule, so I knew that it was happening. We altered it slightly, and I already knew that we were going to do that because we had talked about it. And so I sat down at like 9:30 at night. One night, I was just still working and had it on my mind and couldn't stop thinking about it. So I was like, I'm going to do this right now because I have some ideas in my mind about how I can put it together, and I don't want to forget tomorrow. So I built this in less than 30 minutes, and it takes it down from, let's see, I think I had 26 nodes in this first one, and now I'm only using 7. And that's even counting rename. So it simplified it very much. And part of the process of simplifying it was, what information am I using? So everything in this gray here that you see has been condensed down to this. And the reason why is this is some admissions information. This is rosters of who are active students. And I knew since last year when I created this, I have been using some of that same information in other jobs. And I am picking out very particular information out of the admissions data set. So I went to student services, the person that is in charge of updating the rosters, and I said, I need these 4 points of information. It's a simple 1 or 0 for a yes or a no. I use it all the time. And when I take it out of admissions, I'm having to extract it out from the text because I'm trying to look for things like, were they a master's student here at LMU? Well, the only way we know that from the admissions is to see if LMU is listed as their graduate college. And it is, but it could also be LMU / it could be completely written out, like Lincoln Memorial University. It could be spelled wrong. So I was having to do a lot of time manual editing to try and figure out who was actually a master's student. And it was too tedious to have to continuously go in and check the note to make sure that I got it correct. So I went to student services and I talked to her and I said, I need these 4 points of information. I put it together on one of the rosters so you can see what it looks like. I spent the time to do that because ultimately this speeds all of my jobs up. And that's what it's about, is trying to make your data work for you. So I said, I did one already. I want to show it to you. Is this too much for you to continue doing on the rosters moving forward? We won't go backwards, but we'll start with our first two years that are currently here. And then moving forward, we'll include this information. Because she already was putting some of it in there, but they were color coding, and colors don't translate into construct. So it didn't really matter to me that she had it color coded. I was having to go in and manually look anyway. So I just asked her to change it to 1s and 0s, and she didn't have a problem with that. And since she's done that, I was able to condense all of that down to that. And that's just part of having a working relationship with other departments. And really like trying to help them learn how to manage the data. Everything in the blue, so I pulled that from another job last year, but this year I knew exactly what I needed and I had an easier way to get it. So I was able to condense it down and pull directly from there instead of having to try and transform this information around. And part of that was talking to the person that uses this report and saying, this is how we presented it last year. I think there's an easier way. I think we can change the variable up a little bit and represent it differently, and it will be easier to pull and it will be easier to understand. And she agreed. So it took a huge chunk of those notes that I was having to use down that I can pull directly out, and there was less manipulation of it. And then that bottom part still kind of stayed mostly the same. This was pulling from our college workbook to figure out who the advisors are. But even there, I was able to take it down from 4 to 1 and then append it together. So this was not a hard job to put together since I had pieces of it already. It probably took me an hour to put it together and make it look exactly how I wanted it to. I'm a very big perfectionist. But this year, it took me less than 30. I actually would venture to say it probably took 20 minutes, but I was watching TV while I was doing it too. So it was very easy. It was quick to get her an output the next day and say, here's what I come up with. Is that going to work for you, or do you need something else? It worked for her, and that was the end of it for me. And then now next year, I'll just copy and paste this over and change these inputs so that I can still turn that around quickly. It saves, in the end, this improving process is it saves you time. Sometimes you spend some time putting things together just so that in the end you can save yourself time. And it sounds silly, like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour doing this. Is it really going to save me more time than that in the end? The truth is that it does. So like reviewing the inputs, the fact that I asked them to condense some of that information together, now it's represented in 2 places, but I know for sure it's accurate in this one that I use all the time and that I'm always going to be pulling from, made all of my other jobs so much easier. So it saved me time in doing that. It also saves me from having to manually edit some of the inputs every single year, because now we can just pull the information and put it in the roster. So I would say communicating with other departments is really important. Most of the people that I've worked with have been very open to taking suggestions. Haven't approached it in a way that I feel like I need to manage their data, but in a way that, we're working together. I am the main user because I'm the one who's putting all the information together. So how can I make it easier for me? And how can I make it easier for you in the future? In doing that, there's some jobs I do where I keep all the same information together. So you kind of want to connect and condense your similar jobs and output. So instead of creating 5 jobs that essentially give you the same output, maybe with a slight difference, maybe you can only have 2 jobs that do that. So I've created a lot of jobs, but I've also spent some time going, you know what, I know I already have a job that does this. How can I make this job work for me to get this other output that I need? It doesn't make sense to start from scratch every single time. Once you've been doing it for a while, there's a high chance that you've already done some of what you need to do in another job. And that's true for just regular nodes, or if you're having to write any coding in a transform node. I go back all the time and look at coding from old jobs to help me learn how to write it appropriately. Because like I said, I came into this with no experience working with this type of software other than Excel. And now I can at least write basic code that works for Rapid Insight. It's just the thought process of if this and that, if this is what I need and how do I get to it. So managing your data and creating a report in Construct and trying to get them out to people is all about the process of where do I start, what's my end product, and what's the journey in between, and how do I get there. And so improving on your processes is so important because it helps you. It helps other people because you get your reports out quicker, but it really maximizes your time so that you're not spending unnecessary time on jobs like you might have been in the beginning. And I know that I don't always have time to do that, but I even just did a job 2 days ago that I had a Post-it note from last September to go back and look at it because I knew there was an easier way to do some stuff in it and just haven't had time. Well, I came back around time to use it, and I was like, well, I need to schedule out the time right now to work on this. Even though it doesn't really fit in my schedule, I need to figure out where I can fit it because I know that it's something I need to do. It's going to make things easier for me at the end. As far as just like best practices for when you're putting all your information together, the biggest thing that I would say is anticipating, being proactive. If you anticipate your own needs, if you anticipate the needs of your stakeholders, the people who request information from you, how they're going to use it, it makes everything exponentially easier. The director of assessment, I know that if they ask me for 5 variables, that there's a good chance that they might ask me for another 3. They tend to put the same pieces of information together or want to remind them. So I'll go ahead and stick that information in. It's there in the job. It's ready for me to pull. I might not put it in their final report, but when they come back to me and go, you know what, let's also look at this, I can say, that's easy because I've already kind of put that in there. I knew that you might need that. And so in doing that, just communicating with other departments, like I was saying, it's important to communicate with them to figure out what all the data is, the best way to store it, the best way to be able to access it. The biggest thing in that for me is organization of your information. Like, so where does it come from? Where are you hosting it? Is it on your computer? Or is it in somebody else's file? How often do you have to access it? The biggest thing about anticipating and making everything easier on you is organizing your files. You don't want to get lost inside an incredibly long file pathway. You don't want it to be innate, or you do want it to be innate. So you don't want to go, oh, I need XYZ data. Where did I put it? That happens to me a lot, actually, especially if I stick with names that other people give things. But it's important because you don't want to have to go back and rename. Anytime you rename, it breaks pathways inside Construct. So if you rename a folder or a subfolder, an Excel file, a tab inside an Excel file, it's going to break your pathway. So it's important to kind of anticipate where you're going to need all of your information in the beginning, and just be willing and understanding to know that if you need to make a change, it's going to affect every job that you use that with, because now you have a broken pathway. I know that I do use folders within folders, but I do have some where I just have one folder full of information. The name of the folder doesn't necessarily, for me, represent what's in there, but I know that information is in there, so I just continue to use it because it's less confusing for me, and I know exactly where to go to get it. Do your own personal tips and tricks. Experiment with the nodes. Like I said, use coding from old jobs. The biggest thing is that I have learned, like, my skill set has expanded. The time that I've saved myself, the outputs that I've been able to provide to people have really given me a lot of leverage for being able to grow my career more. And it's growing more into, from an assessment specialist position, it's growing more into a data management and kind of quality improvement type of role. So it's helping me in my own career, and really anything that you can do to help yourself is always good. So if you need help, you ask for it. Don't be afraid to ask Rapid Insight. I call all the time and say, I need to talk about this. I can't figure this out. And 4 minutes later, after I've talked for 4 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay, I know the answer. And then that's it. I don't even actually need help. I just need somebody to bounce my ideas off of. But they're great for answering any questions when I can't figure something out. And I have spent hours on something when really I could have called. So if you ask for help, if you need help, ask for it. Do challenge yourself to try and figure things out. Challenge yourself to learn more inside the program, and let those experiences guide you on what you're doing. Your familiar territory, it expands. So when I first started, I really didn't know anything, and now, if I get a request, it's not often that I get a request that I can't turn it around very quickly, because of the fact that I've just been challenging myself inside the program and what I can do with it, and letting that in the process of improving everything I've been doing guide me. really now towards data management and the quality improvement. And my biggest thing for that is documenting. It seems really silly, but there's an option to create a floating note in there, and so it's kind of like a post-it note. And I use post-its a lot. I have probably 10 lists on my desk with 25 post-its at any point in time. So these are just post-it notes I can keep inside the job and never lose. It's anywhere from here's an idea for next year to this particular piece of information comes from this worksheet. I mean, it seems like it's super obvious information, but sometimes for whatever reason, I need to remind myself, like especially if I only use it once a year, I might open it and look at it and be like, why did I do that? and then if I have a note, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. And then any exceptions, we always have students who are the exceptions to the rule. So like for analysis, we're having to pull them out. And I even go so far as putting notes to, once you run this and you have your data set, don't forget to go in and change these 3 things, So if I know they want it visually a certain way rather than just a big block of data, I'll leave notes for myself that way. Like, don't forget to go in there. Or on Bridge, I have some notes where I need to change filters. So I just put notes right next to my output. Don't forget to go in and change this filter whenever you run this. So that is my biggest one for probably one of my biggest tips and tricks is leave yourself notes, no matter how silly or obvious they seem. In the end, they're always helpful. So I think that brings me to the end, so that we can, if anybody has any questions, I'm assuming James is going to pop back on.
Well, in this case, assuming has no negative downside, I am here happily popping back in. And I wanted to, first of all, thank you, Jessi. I don't know if it was mentioned ahead of time, but there was a bit of an explosion of pollen in the area, and we very much appreciate and can't thank you enough for presenting despite that. So to you, on behalf of myself and everybody, thank you so much for presenting, Jessi. I wanted to offer up a recap for everybody. There's so many things to latch onto that regardless of exactly which challenge individuals are facing, there's something that can be a point of focus. So just to recap, let me pull up the next slide here for a moment. There we are. I want to make an open call to people just as a bit of an interactive chat element here. First of all, continue to ask questions as they come in, but before I start fielding or directing attendee questions, I do just want to say, we talked about at the very start of this, creating a foundational input and expanding from there. So accomplishing the requirements and then starting to, I guess, put the icing on the cake, as it were, to offer different levels of business intelligence product for different audience members, both respecting the requirements of maintaining data security, but also the operational desires, making sure that it's something that matches somebody's intended level of interaction. Thinking or planning before scaling, making sure that if you are building something that you're building it in the fashion that most supports your ability to support a larger audience. And really that's the aspiration, is that business intelligence goes on to become a routine part of organizational practice. And that's only possible if you can maintain the level of output, which Jessi mentioning the call for each and recycling workflows that have benefited her in the past for future purposes has been able to accomplish that. And then those tips, the best practices of improving your processes intelligently, anticipating the needs as you're going through the iterations, organizing the work that you're doing and making sure that you're not setting yourself up for a stressful reintroduction next reporting period, next year, whatever it may be, and keeping notes. Now, of all of those things, I wonder to the audience, which resonated the most? Just as a bit of a straw poll. Feel free in the questions panel to echo the thing that you most appreciated, the thing that you're working on right now, the thing you've had maybe even the most success improving. I would love to hear from you. Now that I've made that call for questions, I'm going to start going ahead and directing those questions as they merit. So Jessi, first I'll start off with this one. Really, it's just a vote of support and encouragement because from the audience is a comment, somebody saying that they use notes within their diagrams all the time. So if you're also one of that group, I'll count that as an answer to the open call a moment ago as well. So the first actual question here in chronological order anyway, hope I'm able to get to all of them, is all that training and support free? I'll to avoid any bias, I'll let Jessi answer that.
So all of my training sessions were free. I don't know if they're part of the cost of the product. It's built into it. My training sessions were usually limited to an hour at a time, and in the beginning, I want to say quite a few, maybe like when I very first, like the first 2 weeks I started using the product, I probably had 2 or 3, just to try and get a feel for what I was doing. But I also had some experience with Excel, so understanding how the nodes worked wasn't incredibly intimidating to me. It was just trying to piece together doing something new, and them helping me with the advisor report. Once I had that particular job written, I started taking pieces from that, and I would just go back in and look at the nodes and see what they did inside them to try to figure out, like, how can I make this work for another job? So how do I use the nodes to get what I need without having to call? So that challenging yourself thing was really big to me. So, but anytime I've ever called, I don't know, I haven't hit a project that was so intensive yet, I guess, that I wasn't like, hey, I need 20 hours of your time. But so everything for me has been free and super, super friendly. And I mean, it's, I'm not saying this because I'm presenting right now, but like I do love recipients data. If anybody asks me, my favorite part of my job is using like all the recipients data products. And it really opened up a whole new world for us at work in terms of what we can get out to people and what we can do with the data that we already had. Because, I mean, we have a lot of data and it just trying to reconcile. I used to have to reconcile grades by hand because the registrar just doesn't always put them in correctly. And I've even written in jobs where, I mean, it's a weekly task that I reconcile 3rd and 4th year rotation grades for our rotation director because she puts them in, she sends them, and we still have ones that get recorded incorrectly or they get recorded twice. And so it's just kind of like my responsibility. And I used to be doing that by hand for every single person. So I mean, I really do. I do love the product.
Yeah, and I should disclaim there is a special circumstance tied to the free and unlimited support that Jessi has. It's because she uses our product, which is maybe a little too tongue in cheek. All of our users, if you're evaluating the software or if you're a paid user, it's free and unlimited customer training and support. And that's everything from which buttons to press if you need to accomplish a specific task to how do I interpret this. So it's part of the deal, and it's something that I've really appreciated, especially in getting to work with Jessi on some of these projects in that peripheral fashion. So all good news there. No exceptions to that either. Let's see, I'm going through the questions here. And oh, another response here to the open call. The feature, the piece of advice that resonated the most with this person was the creating different levels of outputs for the different audiences that you have for each of the reports. I'm going to pull that up again just to show that visual as long as I can do that pretty quickly here. So just to show that again, this idea of being able to easily split it out and generate different products for different intended uses. Let me keep an eye on the
Hmm.
time here. Do you have another question? Does Rapid Insight have some sort of facility for recording job descriptions and having a library of job descriptions for reuse? We do. Um, I can field that one, or just at least share that you may notice, and let me do a little drawing here, just because I usually can't help myself. Up here at the top, edit notes, there's a huge variety of possibilities when you're trying to annotate a job. You can rename the nodes themselves, which is really valuable when you're reapproaching a task that you've done in the past. You can create floating notes, which we've seen a little bit on that last slide there. But in addition, the job descriptions being the question at hand, you can have a description or notes about the entire workflow overall that are accessible back here in the workspace where you would be looking at your entire list of all of your workflows. So they are really easy to organize, to index, to group. You can use folders, which it's a small thing. It sounds weird to get excited about, but it all makes a difference when it's time to um, hopefully not have to build something from scratch again. Um, okay. Uh, let's see. Another question here. This is for the communication part, Jessi. And actually, based on the time, may be the last question. This person is interested in if you can describe your process of transitioning your stakeholders from that. You were mentioning like an Excel spreadsheet and a shared drive interface to the bridge interface. Any insight to share on how to get people to expect their product in a different location or in a different method?
Yeah. So when I first did like the password protected PDFs, we were formatting to make them look all like colorful, or because that's my preference. So I was making them colorful, but I was having to do that for every single person. And I knew, and that's just because that's what I had to work with, and that's what I was making work for me. So when we got access to Bridge, um, what I did was figured out, the best way that I thought to get it on there after I had talked to some of the advisors and walked them through it. But honestly, what I did is I created picture tutorials. It's the easiest thing. It calls back to like when I first started here and I was doing the curriculum, I was also like a slash admin. And some of the things I got questions about all the time, I just started making picture tutorials so I could just forward it on because it was much easier than answering 10 emails about it. So I created picture tutorials and turned them into PDFs on how to sign up for Bridge, on how to go in and click your dashboard and what it looks like and what the information means. And when we first got the product, we used them a lot. Now I use basically those materials for any new faculty that come on or any new advisors that are going to have access to it. I can send it to them and say, "This is how you sign up." And I I I literally put like when you go in, click sign up, and then like the next step is put in your email address. So I made it as easy for them as possible to try and answer all of it and just tell them up front like this is what it's going to look like. And then from that point, if they had questions, I worked with them individually. This was obviously before COVID, but now during COVID, any of the new advisors that have come on and had questions, we have done Zoom and just done a share screen, and I've walked through their dashboards with them, and I don't seem to have any issues with it, especially since they can download the information to a CSV from Bridge if they want to. I actually had an advisor email me today and say he didn't realize you could click the totals line to see everything at one time. He's clicking an individual student to look at their grade. And I literally took a snapshot of his thing and highlighted, click this number 28. It's actually Dr. Wong, who I have used as an example in here. And then when you're in the drill down, there's a download for a CSV. So I was like, you can just screenshot it. You can click that, and that will let you download. So for some of them, the ones that don't have as much time or aren't as familiar, I guess, with using technology on computers, it's helpful to them. A lot of them also request one-on-one time, but usually it's like a 10 to 15 minute. It's very easy, and they haven't seemed to have any issues with it.
Yeah, that reminds me of the advice of having multiple business intelligence levels of detail, but also multiple levels of explanation available for people who are consuming business intelligence.
Right. It
Um,
also helps, even
Go
though
ahead.
they were getting it, they had only been getting those PDFs for one semester. They had never been getting that information before. And some of that was envisioned by me. Some of it was envisioned by our director, but we, like using Rapid Insight, we were able to give them access to stuff they've never had access to before. And I've done a presentation on that, but it gives them an accurate picture of what's going on, and also puts data at their fingertips, and especially for administration, for them to be able to walk up and just say, I had a request yesterday from our dean. He said, can you give me this, this, and this? I don't want it to take 2 hours. I don't need a lot of explanation. I just need the information. And I said, okay, sure, because it's that simple. So,
Yeah, it's a story that we really like hearing because we also really like being a part of it and helping customers to do that. I do want to respect time. I really appreciate that so many of you have been able to stay on past the top of the hour. I will very briefly mention that if you're interested in hearing more about the actual mechanics of the software and how it's been able to help Jessi with her business intelligence output and products and strategy, we would be very happy to answer questions you have or to even go as far as giving a personalized walkthrough of the software. You can try it out for yourself. But more importantly than any of those things, thank you. A copy of this webinar, as it says here, will be emailed to you so that you can review it or share it with a colleague. And I now have the task of saying thank you as well to Jessi for making time for this presentation and for being willing to share all of your experiences.
no problem.
Uh,
Thanks for.
Absolutely. And with that, I will wish everyone well. I hope that all of your business intelligence efforts are met with both great success and also are heavily used and reviewed, since those are the two, I guess, best things that can happen when you're creating data outputs. So thank you, good luck, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.